My name is Raina, and this is the story of how a quiet waitress used the psychology lessons her father drilled into her to dismantle a violent biker gang without ever lifting a weapon. If you like stories driven by emotion, power, and the unexpected strength of a woman no one saw coming, stay with me. Because what follows changed my life forever. I always say that Thursday nights at Shiloh's bar carry a strange kind of energy. Restless, humid, almost vibrating beneath the neon lights. Houston does that to people. The heat, the noise, the way the city never really sleeps even when it pretends to. I've worked at Shiloh's for 3 years, quietly moving through crowds, taking orders, smiling when needed but never inviting attention. Attention is unpredictable. Attention brings people too close. And I learned early in life that closeness is a luxury, one that can turn dangerous fast. My father taught me that. Most people only knew him as the older man who fixed up an old Chevy in our driveway and smoked mint gum instead of cigarettes. But behind the soft shirts and silver hair, he was once one of the best FBI profilers in the Southwest Division. And even after he retired, he couldn't help himself. He trained me the way some dads teach their daughters how to change a tire. I grew up learning how to read a room before I ever learned long division. People lie with their mouths, he used to tell me. But their shoulders, their eyes, their breathing, those never lie. Those lessons shaped me. They also saved me. But that night, I didn't know I'd need more than instincts. I'd need every shadow of training he ever put in me. The bar was louder than usual. A group of oil workers sat at the corner table, talking big payday numbers. A couple argued under their breath near the jukebox. Country rock hummed low, vibrating the floorboards. I was wiping down the counter when I felt something shift in the room. A sudden quiet. A tension. The kind that grabs the back of your neck like a cold hand. I didn't even need to look up. When predators enter a space, the air always changes. Their boots echoed before I saw them. 5 men. Leather vests. Heavy chains. Tattoos that looked like they'd been done in backrooms, not studios. They carried the kind of confidence that came from being feared, not respected. The Vipers. A notorious biker gang that had been creeping around Houston for months. Shiloh, the owner, pretended not to notice. He knew better than to step into anything that smelled like trouble. And these men smelled like gasoline, ego, and the kind of violence that didn't need a reason. One of them, tall, sunburned skin, shaved head, walked toward me with a crooked grin. "Well, well," he said, leaning against the counter. "Ain't you a quiet little thing?" I smiled politely. "What can I get y'all?" "Y'all," he repeated, mocking my accent. "Cute." The others laughed. Loud. Exaggerated. The kind of laugh that wasn't about humor. It was about power. I kept my expression neutral. No flinch. No reaction. Reacting gives them the first win. "We'll take 5 beers, another said, slapping the counter hard enough to make the glasses rattle. "Unless you want to recommend something stronger. Sweetheart." Sweetheart. A word men like them use the way some men flick ashes onto a floor they don't intend to clean. I handed out the beers one by one. But when I set the last one down, the man with the shaved head reached out and slid his fingers across my wrist. Slow, claiming, as if I belonged to the moment he created. I pulled my hand back gently. Calmly. Not out of fear. Out of strategy. His eyes narrowed, not because he was angry, but because he noticed I didn't react the way he wanted. Interesting. Men like him always want a reaction. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Too good for a friendly touch." Friendly. My father taught me that word is often a mask. "I'm working," I said simply. "Just doing my job." The one with the beard, thick, dark, and unwashed, leaned forward. "She thinks she's better than us." "No," the leader said, his gaze locked on me. "She thinks we can't get to her." That made the others laugh again, but I heard it, that thin, sharp edge beneath the humor. The insecurity. The need to be respected. Or feared. Preferably both. Weakness. A big one. And it belonged to their leader. I catalogued it in my mind the same way my father taught me to catalogue suspicious behavior at airports. He tapped his knuckles on the counter. Come on, sweetheart. Smile. You look like you're hiding something. It was meant to intimidate. To force vulnerability. He had no idea he was standing in front of the wrong woman. I smile when I feel like smiling, I said softly, so softly that he leaned in to hear me, which let me study him up close. His pupils. His breathing. The tension in his shoulders. The rapid movement in his jaw. And the faint whiteness of a healing scar right near his eyebrow. A scar from a ring. Not a fist. Meaning someone close to him hit him. Meaning there were fractures inside his group. Meaning his weakness went deeper than insecurity. He pulled back as if I had invaded him. Not the other way around. The humiliation on his face wasn't loud. It was cold. Quiet. Dangerous. You should watch yourself, he murmured. I do, I said. Very carefully. The bar fell silent. Even the jukebox seemed to hold its breath. Then he smirked. Fake smile, defensive reaction. I like her, he said to the others. She's got a little spark. They laughed again and walked to their table, but the moment stayed in the air, sharp and lingering. And something inside me shifted. I wasn't afraid. Not even shaken. I was activated. By the time they finished their beers, one of them would collapse from the panic attack he'd been hiding for months. Another would start questioning his leader's loyalty. Another would remember the secret tattoo on his ribs he never wanted the group to see. Because I had seen everything. Not just their actions. Their dynamics. Their fractures. Their tells. Their secrets. They came into my bar thinking they could own the night. But they had just handed me a map, a blueprint of their entire gang written in their bodies, expressions, and insecurities. And that was the night I started planning their downfall. Not loudly. Not with threats or weapons. Silently. Softly. One psychological cut at a time. When the Vipers finally drifted away from the counter and settled into their booth, the whole bar seemed to exhale. Conversations picked back up, though people were careful, glancing over at them without ever letting their eyes linger too long. But I wasn't looking away. I watched everything. Not the way a scared woman watches a threat, but the way a hunter watches prey that doesn't know it's being studied. Their booth was near the back, under a yellowed Miller Lite sign that flickered every few seconds. They didn't notice the flicker. They were too busy puffing their chests, spitting crude jokes, and slapping the table as if they needed to prove something to each other. Men who feel the need to perform are the easiest to dismantle. My father taught me that the real secrets of a group aren't in what they say, but in who reacts when something is said. So I watched reactions. The shaved head leader, who I mentally labeled Ridge, did most of the talking. Loud. Dominating. His arms spread across the booth like he was claiming territory. He made eye contact with people only long enough to assert dominance before looking away to signal indifference. Classic alpha mimicry. Fake confidence always looks performative. Next to him sat the bearded one. Dark hair, thick jaw, smaller eyes. He rarely spoke unless Ridge encouraged him. A follower. Conditioned by someone else's authority. He laughed harder than the others even when nothing was funny. Insecure subordinate. Across from them was a thinner man. Twitchy, tapping the table with 2 fingers in a rapid pattern. Anxiety. Possibly untreated. He kept glancing at the door, then to the bathrooms, then to the bar. Hypervigilant. Paranoid. Maybe even scared of Ridge. A fracture. And then, Another one. A muscular guy with tattoos creeping up his neck like vines. Confident, but not loud. His eyes flicked to Ridge every time someone spoke, as if weighing him, judging him, resenting him. Threat to Ridge's authority. Perfect. Every weak spot, every tension, every unspoken resentment, they were gifts. And I took them quietly, storing them like ammunition. I took them their second round of beers. Ridge smiled like he was doing me a favor just by looking at me. See. She likes serving us, he said loudly. I set the beers down. I like good tippers. The nectar-tattooed one snorted, but Ridge's jaw tightened. He didn't like being laughed at, even subtly. Good. Noted. Beard guy leaned forward. Come sit with us. I'm working, I repeated. Ridge tilted his head, studying me. You one of those girls who acts shy but likes attention? No, I said calmly. I'm one of those girls who sees more than people think. The table grew quiet. Ridge raised an eyebrow. Yeah. Like what? I looked at each of them, slow, measured, letting my gaze linger just long enough to unsettle. You, I said to Ridge, like being in control. But not because you're strong. Because you're afraid of the moment someone realizes you're not. His smile froze. I turned to Beard Guy. You follow whoever threatens you the least. His face drained of color. Then to the twitchy one. And you're waiting for someone to walk through those doors. Someone you don't want to see. The room shifted. Even the music felt distant. And finally, my eyes landed on the neck-tattooed man. You don't trust your leader. The entire booth fell into a suffocating silence. Necktat looked sharply at Ridge. Ridge glared at him. Beard Guy shrank. Twitchy swallowed hard. I'm a waitress, I said with a small shrug. I notice things. Comes with the job. Then I stepped away, leaving them with the poison I had just planted. Because when a group like theirs begins wondering who cracked first, they begin cracking everywhere. Back behind the bar, Shiloh approached me, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. What did you say to them? He whispered urgently. They look like they're about to kill each other. I grabbed a tray. Nothing. Raina. His voice trembled. Don't start something we can't finish. I looked at the booth. Ridge was leaning over the table, eyes sharp, whispering something that made the other three stiffen. I'm not starting anything, I said quietly. They did. Shiloh touched my arm. They're dangerous. So am I. He paused. I don't think he fully understood what I meant, but he felt something. Some shift in my energy he'd never seen before. Just be careful, he murmured. I'm always careful. And I was. Careful enough to know that what I'd done already wasn't revenge. It was the first thread. Pull it slow. And an entire gang begins unraveling long before they even notice the seam. Outside the bar windows, Houston's streets buzzed with their usual restless energy. Neon reflections shimmered in puddles from an earlier rain. Cars hummed past. People laughed on the sidewalks. The world went on, blissfully unaware of the war I had just quietly started. A war they would never see coming. Because the Vipers thought they had walked into a bar and intimidated a soft-spoken waitress. What they didn't know was that they had handed their lives to a woman raised on psychological warfare. And I was just getting started. The Vipers stayed until closing time. Most nights, a gang like that would leave in a blaze of noise, shouting, revving engines, marking territory with sound. But that night, they left quiet. Too quiet. That's how I knew the crack had started to form. They didn't push their chairs back loudly. They didn't slap each other on the back. They didn't swagger out like kings of the street. No. They left like men who suddenly didn't trust the ground beneath them. Shiloh locked the door behind them, exhaling like he'd held his breath for an hour. "They'll be back," he muttered. "People like that always come back." "I know," I said, grabbing my bag. He looked at me, brows furrowed. "Raina, what did you see in them?" "The truth. Everything." But I gave him the softest answer. "Patterns," I said. "Just patterns." I didn't tell him I saw Ridge's micro-expression when I'd mentioned fear of losing control. That slight twitch near his eye that meant the words hit something raw. I didn't tell him about the neck-tattooed man, the one who had sat strangely stiff the whole time, as if he was waiting for permission to breathe, or the small tremor in Beard Guy's hands indicating deep shame. Shame is dangerous in men like him. It turns into loyalty or violence, and nothing in between. And twitchy. The man looked like he had a secret strapped to his ribs like explosives. The gang wasn't tightly bonded. They were held together by Ridge's dominance, and weakness disguised as strength never holds long. And I had just placed a crack right at the center of their foundation. It was only a matter of time before the break spread. When I stepped outside, the Houston air hugged me in its heavy warmth. Streetlights flickered over the parking lot. A train horn echoed somewhere far off. The city wasn't quiet, not really, but it was calmer than the storm I felt brewing behind me. As I walked to my car, something told me not to unlock the door yet. My father always told me to listen to the feeling behind the feeling. Logic protects you. Instinct saves you. So I paused. And then I saw it. A faint shimmer under the driver's side door. Oil. Fresh. Not dripping from my car. Spilled. On purpose. A message. Not from the 5 who came in, but someone watching them. Or watching me. Someone else had been there tonight. Someone silent. Hidden. Smart enough not to show his face. I crouched down, checking the underside of my car. No cuts in the brake line. No tracker. No device. Just a deliberate spill. A warning without a threat. My breath tightened, not from fear, but from calculation. The vipers weren't the only danger in the room. Someone else had marked me. And unlike Ridge's loud arrogance, this message was subtle. Too subtle. Someone skilled. Someone patient. Someone who knew how to avoid attention. Someone trained. A stalker. A rival gang. A cop gone rogue. Or someone inside the vipers who didn't walk in with them. I straightened up slowly. The street was empty, but the feeling wasn't. I wasn't alone. Not tonight. When I got home to my small apartment near East Downtown, I didn't turn on the lights immediately. Instead, I stood in the dark, listening. Silence has a texture. People don't realize that. It has weight, temperature, direction. Tonight, it felt wrong. I waited, listened, watched the faint outline of my living room. But nothing moved. Still, I knew someone had been near me. Not physically in my home, but in my orbit. A watcher. A ghost. The vipers didn't have ghosts. They had loud threats and stupid bravado. This was different. Which meant one thing. My revenge was about to collide with someone else's agenda. I showered, changed into soft shorts and a tank, then sat cross-legged on the floor with a notebook. I only used notebooks for things that mattered. Things that needed patterns, maps, timelines. And tonight needed all 3. I wrote. Ridge. Fragile ego. Needs dominance. Secret humiliation. Scar. Rivalry with necktat. Likely abusive to group. Beard guy. Fear-driven loyalty. High shame tolerance. Might break if isolated. Nectity. Intelligent. Second in command energy. Resentment toward Ridge. Possible challenger. Could be manipulated, twitchy, guilt, anxiety, avoidant, jumping at sounds, possibly hiding crime or betrayal. Then I wrote the last entry slower. Unknown watcher, precise, skilled, observant, avoided visibility, marked car, connected to vipers, to ridge, to none. I stared at the page. For the first time that night, a shiver ran through me. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This wasn't just taking down a gang. Something bigger was moving around me. Quietly, intentionally. Someone wanted me involved. Or wanted to warn me off. Or wanted to study me the way I studied them. None of those options were good. And yet, I felt the strangest thing spark inside me. Not fear. Not dread. Not panic. Purpose. A deep, simmering purpose that felt like it had been waiting years for a moment like this. The vipers humiliated the wrong woman. But the watcher, the ghost, might be the real threat. Whoever he was, I'd find him. But first, I needed to pull another thread. Because if I learned anything from my father, it's this. You never hunt the ghost first. You hunt the men you understand. The ghost reveals himself when he thinks you're distracted. And I would let him think exactly that. The next Thursday, the vipers returned. I had been ready. Shiloh's bar smelled like spilled beer and fried onions, the floor sticky in the corners. I walked through the door, tray in hand, confident in the quiet power I carried like armor. Every step was deliberate, calculated. Every glance I gave the vipers was loaded, but not obvious. Ridge noticed me first, of course. The alpha always does. He smirked, loud and arrogant, as if the last week hadn't existed. You're back, he said, leaning on the counter. Same old, same old. I smiled politely, letting the warmth in my eyes be just enough to suggest civility, not fear. Just doing my job, I said. You boys doing okay? Beard guy chuckled, nervously. Neck-tattooed man shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing at Ridge. Twitchy was. Twitchy. Perfect. They were already brittle. I hadn't touched them yet, and already the cracks were showing. As I brought their first round of beers, I spoke softly enough for only Ridge and Necktat to hear. You know, some people worry too much about loyalty, I said casually. Others worry too much about who's actually following them. Ridge froze. His fingers gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. Necktat's eyes flicked to him, subtle but unmistakable. Who's following who? Ridge muttered. His voice was rougher than usual. Depends, I said, walking away with the tray. Could be anyone. Could be no one. Sometimes people pretend to be loyal just to watch someone else fall. I didn't need them to respond right then. I just needed the seed. Later, as I refilled the water glasses, I noticed Necktat's subtle glances at Ridge. Little micro-moments, a hesitation in the smile, a flicker of something like calculation, a jaw tightening as Ridge barked an order to Beard Guy. That was my first real opening. I let it simmer. By the time they finished their beers, I had noticed something else. A shared history that Ridge had tried to dominate, but the others remembered differently. I let a small story slip while cleaning the tables. You know, I said conversationally, not looking at them. Someone once told me the person with the smallest secret often has the biggest power in a group. Funny how people underestimate it. Ridge's jaw tightened. Beard Guy swallowed hard. Necktat glanced at Ridge, just slightly, as if confirming something. Twitchy kept adjusting his sleeve, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Exactly what I wanted. That night, after closing, I sat in my apartment with the door locked. I didn't need to check for the ghost this time. The feeling of observation was too strong to ignore, but the vipers themselves were beginning to unravel, And that was enough for now. I made notes in my notebook. Every reaction, every hesitation, every flicker of doubt. Every tiny crack in their alliance became a thread I could pull. Ridge, the loud, aggressive leader, was terrified of being undermined. His need to dominate made him blind. Nektat, the silent, calculating one, was already questioning Ridge without even realizing it. Beard Guy, the insecure follower, was ready to crumble if his mistakes were exposed. Twitchy, the anxious observer, was carrying something no one knew, something he hoped would never see the light of day. And all I had to do was wait. Because in a week, if I played it right, the first fight would happen right in their booth at my bar. And I would be there. Calm, quiet, untouchable, watching it bloom. As I closed my notebook, I heard the faintest sound of metal against concrete outside my window. The ghost. Someone was still watching me. Someone skilled. Someone patient. I let the sound sink into my awareness but didn't move. I didn't need to yet. The vipers would tear themselves apart first. The ghost would reveal himself later. And when he did, I would be ready for him too. It started quietly. A small argument at the booth. Nothing loud. Just a whispered challenge that no one else in the bar would notice, except me. I had noticed it immediately. Ridge was furious, his voice low and dangerous, directed at Nektat. You think you can do what? Behind my back. Nektat didn't flinch. Not at first. His eyes were cold, calculating, and for the first time, I saw a hesitation in Ridge, a leader momentarily unsure of himself. Beard Guy shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the two. Twitchy kept adjusting his hands, jaw tight, sweat forming at his temples. Perfect. I smiled inside. I had planted the seed, and now it was sprouting. It was all so easy to manipulate, really. People like Ridge, the loud, alpha types, don't respond to reason. They respond to threats, real or imagined. I had whispered the suggestion of a challenge, a doubt about loyalty, and that was enough. Nektat leaned in, voice calm but icy. I'm not trying to challenge you. I'm trying to keep us alive. You don't see the risks you take. Ridge slammed his fist on the table, rattling their drinks. You think I'm stupid? I think you're blind, Nektat replied, softer now but sharper. And then it happened. Beard Guy, under Ridge's glare, snapped. Guys, maybe he's right. We're walking into heat we can't handle. Twitchy's hands trembled so violently, the napkins on the table danced with his movement. Ridge turned on him next. And what's your problem? You think I'm wrong too. The tension was so thick you could taste it. I appeared at the booth, casually refilling their drinks. They didn't notice me step closer, not because they weren't aware, but because the fight had sucked all their attention. I smiled politely, just enough to remind Ridge I existed. You boys look tense tonight, I said softly. Careful, it can make people do things they regret. Ridge's jaw clenched, Nektat's eyes flickered, Beard Guy swallowed hard, Twitchy avoided all eye contact. Exactly as planned. By the end of the night, Ridge and Nektat had almost come to blows, their own insecurities and resentments exploding. Beard Guy was hovering nervously, clearly caught between loyalty and fear. Twitchy was pale, muttering excuses under his breath, shaking like a leaf in a storm. And all of it, every micro-expression, every misstep, was captured in my mind. I didn't need cameras. I didn't need notes. I had the memory of a profiler, and every tiny crack became a weapon. When they left the bar, Ridge was glaring at Nektat with a promise that couldn't be ignored. Nektat returned the stare with one of defiance, not submission. Beard Guy lingered behind, muttering apologies, while Twitchy rushed out, eager to escape before anyone yelled at him. And that, my dear reader, was the beauty of psychology. You don't need violence. You don't need guns. You just need the right whisper, the right glance, the right observation, and people will destroy themselves. Back in my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and reviewed the night in my mind. Every tiny reaction, every flicker of doubt, every tremor of fear, it was all ammunition now. But the ghost, the one who had marked my car, he hadn't shown himself. Not tonight. Not yet. I knew he was still out there. Patient. Watching. Waiting. And a part of me wondered if he was connected to the vipers, or if he was a completely separate predator who had noticed the same patterns I had. Either way, I welcomed him. Because the vipers were breaking themselves. And when the ghost finally stepped into the game, I would be ready. I went to bed with a plan forming in my mind, each thread of the gang's dynamics mapped and ready to pull. I didn't sleep. I prepared. Every sense was sharpened, every instinct alert. By the next week, Ridge's ego would force him into mistakes. Necktat would exploit them, willingly or not. Beard Guy would crack under pressure. Twitchy would expose his secret, even if no one demanded it. And all I had to do was watch, wait, and guide. The silent war had begun. The week passed in a blur of observation. Every time I walked into Shiloh's, my eyes flicked toward the vipers before anything else. I memorized shifts in posture, subtle changes in tone, small behaviors that revealed fractures I hadn't seen the night before. And the fractures were widening. Thursday night arrived again, and Ridge was already tense when I saw him at the door. His swagger was forced, a mask over raw frustration. Necktat followed silently, eyes sharp, calculating. Beard Guy hung back, nervous energy practically vibrating off him. Twitchy hovered near the jukebox, hands clasped, avoiding eye contact. Perfect. I approached their booth with their first round of beers and a casual comment on the night's humidity. You boys handle the heat better than most, I said lightly. Except some of you seem a little on edge. Beard Guy flinched. Necktat's eyes narrowed, not at me but at Ridge. Ridge's jaw tightened. Twitchy shifted in his seat. Exactly the response I wanted. I lingered near the table, just long enough to whisper something that no one else would hear. You know, sometimes people pretend to be loyal just to see how far the leader will push them. Dangerous game, don't you think? Ridge tensed visibly, scanning each member of his crew. Necktat's eyebrow lifted slightly. Beard Guy swallowed hard. Twitchy's hands shook beneath the table. The seed had sprouted into suspicion. By the time the second round arrived, the gang was already unraveling. Necktat leaned toward Ridge under the guise of conversation. You shouldn't have yelled at him. It undermines your authority. Ridge's glare froze him. Undermines? I'm the one keeping this group alive. Beard Guy muttered something I barely heard. Maybe he's right. And Ridge snapped at him. Twitchy nearly spilled his drink. I smiled to myself. It was beautiful, the chaos of doubt taking hold. Later, as I wiped down tables near their booth, Ridge barked at Necktat, and Necktat barked right back. Beard Guy muttered under his breath, clearly torn. Twitchy's voice trembled as he tried to mediate. Every interaction, every hesitation, every flicker of betrayal fed my plan. I didn't touch a single person physically. I didn't threaten. I didn't even raise my voice. All I did was observe, whisper, and guide the threads they already carried. And by the time they left, Ridge and Necktat had argued loudly enough that even Shiloh was worried. Beard Guy had nearly burst into tears. Twitchy left in a hurry, muttering apologies as if he had committed some unforgivable crime. The vipers were cracking, inside my bar, under my quiet watch. Back at home, I documented everything. Every word, every look, every micro-expression. I could practically hear Ridge's confidence shattering from a distance. Nektat's ambition growing. Beard Guy's loyalty faltering. Twitchy's fear consuming him. And somewhere in the shadows, I felt it again. The ghost. The one who had marked my car, who had watched me silently from outside. Still observing. Still patient. Still invisible. I poured myself a glass of wine, my hands steady. They were breaking themselves. And the ghost? He'd step into the game soon enough. When he did, he would find a woman prepared for everything. Because this wasn't just revenge anymore. It was a war of wits. And I was winning. It didn't take long for the cracks I had sown to start turning into chasms. By the next Thursday, the vipers weren't just uneasy, they were openly fracturing. The moment they stepped into Shiloh's, I could feel the tension radiating off them in waves. Ridge's usual confident gait was jerky, defensive, overcompensating. Nektat's eyes constantly flicked toward him, sharp and calculating. Beard Guy avoided Ridge entirely, muttering under his breath, while Twitchy looked like he might disappear into the floor. They weren't aware that every micro-expression, every whisper, every hesitation, every slip of loyalty or resentment, had been catalogued, analyzed, and stored in my mind. I had their entire dynamic memorized, and I was poised to manipulate it like a chess game where I was both player and unseen hand. It started with a small comment, a whispered, accidental mistake I let fall while refilling their drinks. Funny, I murmured under my breath, just loud enough for Nektat to hear, how some people in positions of power have so many enemies in their own ranks. Nektat's eyes flicked at Ridge. Ridge's face tightened. Beard Guy's fingers clenched around his glass. Twitchy's throat went dry. Exactly what I wanted. By the second round, the conversation had escalated. Nektat, fueled by the seed I had planted weeks ago, leaned in and quietly confronted Ridge about a mismanaged deal outside Houston. Something Ridge had boasted about but done poorly. Ridge reacted with aggression, slamming his hand onto the table, red-faced and furious, while Nektat didn't back down. Beard Guy muttered agreements under his breath, and Twitchy almost whispered a confession of complicity he didn't intend to share. The room was suffocating with tension, though the bar remained oblivious. I approached the booth with casual grace, setting down drinks and smiling, a neutral observer. "You boys seem tense," I said lightly. "It's amazing what pressure can reveal." Ridge's glare flicked at me, sharp and dangerous, but I didn't flinch. I had never flinched in my life, and men like him always noticed that. My calm unnerved him more than any insult could. Nektat leaned back, smirking just slightly, clearly emboldened by Ridge's uncharacteristic hesitation. Beard Guy glanced nervously between them. Twitchy's hands were trembling on the table, and I noticed for the first time a faint stain on his sleeve, something he was trying to hide. Secrets. Everyone has them. And tonight, his was about to slip. By closing time, the group was in shambles. Ridge's authority had been challenged, Nektat was emboldened, Beard Guy was anxious, and Twitchy was trembling with the weight of a hidden truth. They stormed out of the bar, slamming doors, muttering threats, and I knew the fallout wouldn't end there. From my apartment window, I watched Ridge's hand shaking as he revved his bike. Nektat's glare burned through the rearview mirror. Beard Guy slumped, defeated. Twitchy's eyes darted nervously at the shadows. The first wave of chaos was complete. But the ghost, the one who had marked my car weeks ago, made his presence felt again. A single note appeared under my door. No name, no signature. Just words. Careful. You're playing a dangerous game. Some pieces aren't meant to be moved. I smiled. Finally, the watcher had revealed himself. Not in person, not yet, but he had acknowledged my moves. And that acknowledgement meant he was skilled, patient, and intelligent. Someone who might be connected to the Vipers, or someone who simply thrived on observing patterns like I did. Either way, I welcomed him. because I had been waiting for this moment. I poured a glass of wine and traced a finger over the note. My mind was already racing, cataloguing, analyzing. He had shown interest. He had recognized the pattern I was weaving. That was valuable information. The war was no longer just with the vipers. It had expanded to someone equally skilled, someone patient, someone who might even challenge me. Good. I had never backed down from a challenge in my life. And I wasn't about to start now. The vipers were crumbling. The ghost was watching. And I was ready for both. Because I had learned early in life that when men like Ridge fall, the chaos they leave behind is power waiting to be claimed. And I was the only one in the room ready to take it. It all came to a head one Friday night. The bar was unusually quiet, the regulars having left early for the weekend. I had purposely cleared the room of distractions. I knew the vipers would return. They always did when tensions were high. They weren't aware that I had been orchestrating every interaction, every whisper, every hesitation, all week. I poured drinks slowly, keeping my eyes on the door. And then they walked in. Ridge. Necktat. Beard guy. Twitchy. Each of them already frayed at the edges, carrying the wounds of doubt I had planted. They looked like a group that had been silently stabbing each other for months. And in a sense, they had. It began innocuously, with Ridge slamming his fist on the counter, accusing Necktat of sabotage during their last run. Necktat didn't back down. Beard guy started shaking, muttering about mistakes. Twitchy's face went pale. His secret, the thing he had been hiding from all of them, was finally slipping out in the tension. I stepped closer, quietly placing fresh glasses on their table. "You boys seem tense," I murmured, deliberately neutral. Careful tension can make people reveal things they don't intend. Ridge's glare cut at me, but I didn't flinch. Necktat's lips pressed into a thin line, aware that I had just whispered a truth they hadn't realized I knew. Beard guy's hands trembled on the table. Twitchy's eyes darted toward the exit, panic flooding his expression. And then it happened. Necktat leaned in, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you're the only one who sees things?" Ridge's response was instantaneous, a roar of frustration. He accused, threatened, swung his hand, but Necktat didn't flinch. The fight erupted. Words became sharp weapons. Fingers pointed, voices rose, and the carefully built facades collapsed. Beard guy cracked, spilling a secret about money Ridge had lost on a deal. Twitchy trembled so badly he nearly revealed the other secret he'd been hiding for months, something that could have ended one of their careers in Houston completely. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. I only watched, catalogued, smiled, because I had already won. By the time the fight reached its peak, Ridge stormed out, furious, leaving Necktat behind with Beard guy and Twitchy. Necktat's glare burned across the empty bar, claiming dominance as Ridge's authority collapsed entirely. The once united gang was now fractured irreparably. And I had done it all without a weapon, without a threat, without raising my voice. Just observation, strategy, and patience. Then the ghost finally made his move. A voice behind me, low, smooth, and deliberate. "You handled them well." I spun, heart steady, gaze sharp. A man stepped from the shadows. A stranger. Tall, lean, eyes like a hawk, posture perfect, movement silent. The one who had marked my car. "I've been watching," he continued, calm, calculating. "You see patterns most people can't. You understand behavior the way few can. Impressive." I studied him silently. Not fear. Not uncertainty. Respect, for his skill, yes, but I didn't flinch. "You're dangerous," I said softly, "and I like that about you." He smiled faintly. "Dangerous enough to survive your little game, or to change it entirely." a subtle acknowledgement. He wasn't here to stop me. He was here to test me. To see if I could handle someone who matched me in patience, observation, and strategy. I stepped closer, calm. I already handled them. The vipers. Broken. And you. I'll see. His eyes glinted, approving. I'll be watching. And with that, he disappeared into the shadows as silently as he had arrived. I sank into the bar stool, exhaling slowly. Houston's streets outside buzzed with oblivious life. Traffic, neon lights, the smell of fried food and gasoline. But inside, I felt the full weight of victory. The vipers were fractured, disoriented, and unlikely to regroup. Ridge would be cautious forever, Necktat emboldened but isolated, Beard Guy terrified, Twitchy exposed. And I had done what I was raised to do. Observe, analyze, and strike at the fractures that others couldn't see. The ghost might still be out there, but I was ready for him. I had learned early in life that control wasn't about dominance, or strength, or aggression. It was about understanding, reading people, using their own weaknesses against them. And in that, I was unmatched. Houston would never forget the night the quiet waitress became the invisible storm that tore apart.